It's nightfall in Madrid at this very moment, and some less fortunate individual stands alone looking up at a news monitor from a grubby railway platform. Fascist graffiti defaces an advertisement below it for a holiday in New York, which no one on the platform can afford. Working short days, it's the only work he can get presently, his shoulders say it all. The weight of the world is taking its toll. Richard Branson burst onto the screen in need of a haircut, expounding the virtues of space travel. And the next news item is a scrubbed bureaucrat sitting grandly in Brussels, discussing the appalling state of the economy. It does his head in as he trudges home to his young family, powerless and caught up in the downward economic spiral, along with other hapless souls on the platform. There's a sense of unfairness and cynicism, a kind of gloom creeping across Europe, probably on many late-night railway platforms at this very moment. Our story then cuts to Mumbai's bumper-to-bumper early evening traffic, and we spot an Indian street trader with his happy wife at their mobile shop selling samosas. They've decided to wrap their samosas in newspaper for hygiene reasons and increase their prices. He's figured out the new office workers in shirts and ties pouring onto the pavement outside the big buildings are quite happy to pay more. As a small family business, it's never been better. Here in the streets of India, we see the spiral in reverse. Across the globe, we're all seriously questioning what's actually gone wrong. The simple answer is our Indian street vendor doesn't have an overdraft. He's never borrowed a rupee in his life. His definition of prosperity is to provide for his family and educate his children. He beams as he so proudly talks about his boy's computer skills, insisting on your business card to connect his son to your network. And so here I am in New Zealand, and it seems worlds away from these two tensions of opposites on the globe. It's taken me 35 years to get here, and yet still I cannot make sense of most of the chaos that surrounds us. All I can do is to give you my take on what all this means to me. I've learned to accept over the years that some days you're the pigeon and some days you're the statue. And the more you complain, the longer God makes you live. I'm told people will accept your ideas much more readily if you tell them that Sir Edmund Hillary said it first. So I can assure you, dear Sir Ed left us with a clear route to the summit and a mandate to knock the bugger off. I doubt if I will ever grace anyone's square in bronze on a rampant horse, and yet in trying to understand where we come from and where we're going, we often find ourselves peering up at the empire's founders. Some of us still hang on to the belief that it all began here in New Zealand with Queen Victoria. Why shouldn't we, as she's so royally quoted? We're not interested in the possibilities of defeat. They do not exist. What better maxim could you have? I sometimes think the cooking would have been better a little sooner had the French raised the flag here. We may have got beyond the roast and 3 veg a little earlier, although I'm not sure how Napoleon would have handled the Maori. He may well have met his Wailu here rather than at Waterloo. Ironically, it is Queen Victoria's comment on marriage which is the most telling of all, when she said, "I feel sure that no girl will go to the altar if she knew all." But we all did go to the altar of Britishness without knowing all, and it has taken me all these years to understand that this is not where it all began, not by a long shot. Our history, like most of yours, I imagine, is like an onion. You peel off one layer at a time, and sometimes you weep. For me, it begins in the 1300s, and I take you back to the bubonic plague in Europe, which wiped out approximately 50% of the population in 5 years. I can't imagine how devastating it must have been to society, but I only want to talk about this from a timeline perspective. It was about this same time Marco Polo was setting out to discover China. Becoming a confidant of Kublai Khan, he returned to tell the most remarkable stories of black liquid which burns from the oil fields of Burqa, of gunpowder, of silk and coal, and many skills which we take for granted, which prior to this no one had ever set eyes on. Ironic in today's terms of China's current renaissance, or whatever the word is in Mandarin. You see, I've learned all this at school along with my Shakespeare, but what the history books didn't tell me was that at this very same time another whole race of fabulous people were traversing the world's largest oceans with consummate ease. Before the celebrated European navigators were born, these amazingly skilled Polynesians sailed freely from the shores of Southeast Asia, harnessing the wind and reaching out across the vastness of the Pacific and settling more and more remote islands. Covering millions of miles of open seas in their giant double-hull canoes, heavily laden with families, animals and vital provisions, it must have been a truly incredible journey and remains one of mankind's most remarkable endeavours. Migrating from southern China, the Polynesians spent over 5,000 years traversing deep into the South Pacific to discover Aotearoa, New Zealand, some 1,700 years ago. They were extraordinary navigators with a wealth of knowledge of the natural world and its subtle signals to guide them in their travels. Countless painstaking hours were spent memorizing vast arrays of stars and constellations from various arrangements of pebbles in the sand. The bewildering breadth of star knowledge carried in their heads included the star paths of every pair of islands they were likely to travel to. They called it their Ave'ia. These wayfinding techniques, along with outrigger construction methods, were kept as guild secrets. Each island maintained their guild or cluster of navigators who had very high status, and in times of famine or difficulty, these navigators could trade for aid or evacuate people to neighbouring islands. When combined with superb ocean-going skills, these navigators could also cover vast distances. The fully rigged 25-metre craft could comfortably cover 150 miles daily in open sea conditions. With the Polynesians' ability to preserve foods for long periods, a range of 5,000 miles in winds that were not always favourable was entirely possible. It was through these journeys that they found the strange land they called Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, drifting quietly in the Pacific, with not a soul in sight. There were no predators. Every creature seemed to be vegetarian. Some birds did not even have wings, as in our kiwi and kakapo. This remarkable group of islands, to quote David Bellamy, was a kind of Noah's Ark, floating off, uninhabited, completely for millions of years, and along with Madagascar, became one of the last two islands settled on Earth. It wasn't until 1769, some 500 years later, that Captain Cook first circumnavigated New Zealand, which had originally been named by Abel Tasman, a Dutch explorer some years earlier. At this same time, Mozart was writing his first symphony at the age of 12 in Salzburg. So we're incredibly adolescent when you think of such timelines. Maori adaptation in only 100 years of settlement was remarkable, and the early Europeans continued in the same tradition. Having arrived at the edge of the world, there was no return ticket. It was a question of survival and just getting on with it. We became an extension of English country life. As Europeans steeped in Victorian ideals, at times it looked as if we didn't have much in common with the indigenous people. We strangely rowed our boats backwards towards the beach, smelt of perspiration in heavy surge, and were particularly hairy. Obsessed with taming the natives, cleanliness and godliness were strong messages being delivered in the new colony, and we loved telling this settler story. However, the story from here on can no longer be one of settlement. We can't afford the nostalgia. The challenge alone going forward for us now is to navigate a new future. We can no longer mine the land from an agricultural perspective, simply to produce commodities, as there isn't anymore. We are now the world's leading pastoralists, but sadly we still have to measure our wealth's temperature by tiny movements in our exchange rate. When the going gets tough, we always do more of the same with a vengeance. We merge meat companies, we promote more tourism, and the like. We become obsessed with process improvement as opposed to product improvement. And differentiating products and finding new ways of doing business is challenging for many of our corporates and government, be it local or central. Moving away from an obsession with volume versus value requires us not just to transform the companies, we have to also transform as individuals and communities. We're only just beginning to realise that our journey has to now be different. So my challenge to New Zealand is to ask, what does the world want from us at its edge, and how do we deliver it sustainably? Essentially, what is New Zealand's Ave'ia? It's hard for New Zealanders to get concerned about their place in the global world. Most communities believe they're working very hard. I often think about boiling frogs, captured best in Dunedin's recent campaign line when they said it's all right here. There's a kind of Antipodean smugness, not helped by our gorgeous countryside and wonderful food. It's easily brought on in most of us. I've just returned from San Francisco, where a really good parking space can move you to tears. These aren't easy times to read, and people are desperate to blame some system or leaders. If you can stay calm while all around you is chaos, then you probably haven't completely understood the seriousness of the situation. Right at this moment in the EU, the term spending a penny has been replaced by urinating. As the temperature of the water has risen over the last few decades, the frog New Zealand has jumped in and out of a few pots, but found them all to be within a few degrees of each other. The phase changes, discontinuities and jump shifts that have occurred have probably destroyed almost as much value as they've created. Politicians are people who stand for what they think the voters will fall for. They simply love having their photo taken and being popular. And democracy for me is the art and science of running the circus from the monkey cage. Over the past few months, we've just changed the cage a little here in New Zealand. And we always hope the circus act will be better, although I'm sad to say the cynics are right 9 times out of 10. With a fresh set of monkeys, I have to say this very carefully, in the cage running our new circus, let's now try to understand the opportunities for us from the edge. The government agencies that create and encourage economic development have generalised their granting programs with the very same commodity mentality. Sadly for me, politics has always been the skilled use of the blunderbuss. Somehow the funnel of support seems to flow the wrong way. New Zealand is still too centrally managed, and we have difficulty creating successful clusters because of the lack of local funding available. We're not short on the analysis at Party Central, but it's executing at the local level, which is seriously underfunded and poorly resourced. Typically, organisations that can't change have an imbalance between their ambitions and their ability to execute. Endless studies in our primary sectors, and we still lack a total beast or crop strategies. It seems abundance is our undoing. Loads of wonderful plans that don't quite come off, usually because of the lack of commitment to the underlying vision or thinking errors. I'd actually prefer to call it cowardice or stupidity. To produce and export higher status products and services to the world requires a major shift in our national psyche. But the severity of the itch is inversely proportional to the ability to reach it. We clearly have to want this. If you want change, discomfort, panic or fear is a useful starting point, but even that's not enough on its own. For the first time in our history, we have to learn how to sell less for more, to take a nation of farmers and turn them into foodies and fashion experts, to bring design to our companies and transform their product values, to invigorate our communities with a new sense of purpose, placing provincialism on the world stage, to romance the regions and their individual specialness. I believe today's world is about regions within countries. Provenance branding in the cluster perspective is a critical dimension of building interest in telling an individual story. Stories of super yacht designers and builders, Pinot Noir growers, health software specialists, adventure tourism operators. The world has an unquenchable desire for content. But where do we look for our inspiration? It's certainly not in the boardrooms. Rudyard Kipling, an Edwardian British writer, best described New Zealand for me when he said, "Last, loveliest, loneliest land apart." And I would add only 2 further expressions to that: last discovered and least affected. It's this land apart which presents our best opportunity to divide into a troubled world. I didn't coin the word consumerism, but I wish I had, as there are growing markets globally at the right price points that care about what they consume, be it a holiday or a glass of wine. I'm convinced that the more people are divorced from nature, the more they are prepared to pay for it. New Zealand's great offering to the world from its edge is just like this. Like every good story, we can be the ultimate in a tension of opposites. Beyond farming, food and beverages, there are many related opportunities in lifestyle products, software, fashion, education. The list is only limited by the degree of our imagination. The world is insatiable in its need for fresh ideas, and ideas from the edge will only appeal if they are original. To reach deep into the national psyche for inspiration means seeing ourselves not just through our collective histories, but rather what we can do with our rich diversity. We have reached a wonderful fusion in our cuisine, but we are only just seeing fleeting glimpses still in our architecture and design. In another context, fusion of ideas, skills and people is still a stretch for most of us. For a long time, I have spoken publicly about the national identity, which continues to elude us. Who are we? And what do we stand for? At a regional level, too many of our cities are still guilty of crashing out new logos, campaigns and taglines, which do little for our souls. They fail to engage sector by sector, life stage by life stage, and help us connect the dots. Even many of our large corporates, particularly the utility companies and banks, have an inability to understand local identity in attempting to capture the hearts of New Zealanders. Most of us are a collection of bits and bytes and dislocated cultures, and in the absence of a constitution, we struggle to define who we are. For me, New Zealand's brand values are best captured in 5 very simple words: unaffected, honest, open, young, active and fresh. And understanding these at a national and provincial level is critical. And I believe our success on the world stage in what we have to offer should be judged on 3 very simple things again: ethics, aesthetics and functionality. When these are embedded in our products and services, they can be very powerful. In a wider world, it's not what we want, it's more what the world wants of us. Many of the projects we have worked on over the years deliver these pieces of magic internationally. Our most recent success in Style Lager Pure's positioning saw a category premium of 30%, which defied all the research. Our work in coarse wool has seen a successful reintroduction of a biblical product to a changed world where natural fibre is hot again. It seems, despite the cost, people want to buy something natural. It took a disgruntled group of farmers to collaborate and support the repositioning of merino fibre. 13 years ago, a young student collared me at a conference, which became the beginning of a long relationship in the development of Icebreaker's brand of adventure clothing. Now a teaching case model at Harvard University's Business School, from 0 to over $200 million in 12 short years, and it's not IT. We have worked on identity projects at both national, regional levels over many years, in New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, and more recently in the Middle East and the Czech Republic. Without exception, identity and a sense of place is the starting point to galvanise intentions and localise a commitment to adding value. We have worked in the successful creation of clusters in wine, dairy, kiwi fruit, seafood, venison and tourism, and we are completely convinced in the power of what I call positive parochialism. Of course, at the end of the day, we're talking about economics, and it took me 2 goes to pass this subject. I didn't like its black and white theories and case models. Too often, economists are guilty of excessive numeric comparisons. Put simply, if you ask them how their wife's health is, they may well reply, in relation to what? You see, comparing nations and communities has its pitfalls. It's what we want as a community of interest that matters most in measuring success. People viewing this presentation may come from many cultures. And although we share a common theme we are discussing at this moment, the challenges, I imagine, are all quite different. For most of the last 7 decades, which is to say about as long as economists have been calculating what's now called gross domestic product, it's been criticised for being, well, too gross. Economies on steroids with bankers as personal trainers is a very frightening thought. Economic resources are not all that matters in people's lives, yet as a convenient marker of national economic health, GDP tends to dominate discussions of how nations rank against one another. The time is right for our measurement system to shift emphasis from measuring economic production to measuring people's well-being. It seems to me GDP measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile. 3 weeks ago in Cartagena, I was on the end of a magnificent cigar in this most beautiful city of Colombia, and despite all its economic challenges, I saw happiness everywhere. Each community of interest has to decide on its own criteria and benchmarks for success. If you look at the environmental policies of Costa Rica, where I was a few weeks ago also, you might well ask, are they affordable? Certainly the people of Costa Rica think so. Their pura vida, or life quality, statement is a serious commitment by them towards long-term sustainability goals, as opposed to our own uncommitted superlative, 100% pure. We are 4 years into a project deep into the Pacific in the Cook Islands, re-establishing their black pearl industry. From their pristine northern lagoons to the jewellers of Fifth Avenue and Bond Street, we have recreated an authentic, accredited value chain, and we are well on the way to renewing the wealth of a very remote community. Incredibly satisfying for our team just to simply know that our work will sustain life on these remote atolls for many years to come. Our work in the Middle East on identity projects is to try and undo the Americanisms which they have become smitten by, and which are now fast becoming the very influences which add to their instability. They have so much to be proud of, which will take them well beyond the chasma and their defensiveness. Fortunately, I have lived long enough to know it's possible. The tangible examples of the work we're doing in Central Otago, in forming clusters in tourism, summer fruits, wine and outdoor adventure, has seen it grow faster than any other region in New Zealand. Sitting across the breakfast table in an old settler's cottage, you may well find a New York dentist and his wife who've been everywhere. Hearing their moments of joy tells me we have something special to offer, where price is completely secondary. The renaissance of Maori culture and heritage brings a unique dimension to our story. We are currently working with their leaders in positioning their services and products, which have immense appeal, particularly in Asia. Unique IP which is only just beginning to take shape. Modernising Māori is a sensitive process. However, I'm pleased to report we have been well received and very much encouraged. The Māori sense of family or whānau is at the core of any cluster collaboration and comes naturally to Māori people. Their intergenerational land and sea-based businesses already contribute significantly to the economy. Given the new capability and repositioning efforts, the potential contribution here to our economy is immense. We have many gems. As they say in their culture, it takes a whole village to raise a child. When you homogenise a nation's people, and I fear Australia has done this to themselves, people and communities struggle to find their special place. Our mates across the Tasman continue to perpetuate the settler story, and newcomers just have to fit in. I would hate to see the whole of this new New Zealand described in the same way. We are a collection of very different places and people, and together with our many cultures, climates, forests, mountains and beaches, we become a feast for anyone's soul. For me, it's about twin citizenship, that we are a citizen of a nation and a region, and that they can fit quite comfortably alongside each other. New Zealand has a kind of raw sophistication, a sort of Pacific chic which attracts people to us. Our creative sector is beginning to see inspiration in everything around us, and gradually we are fashioning products and services with unique appeal on the world stage. New Zealand's opportunity to divide into a troubled world has never been better. At present we feed 20 million people globally, and it's possible we could feed 50 million within the next 25 years. Even then it will only be 0.5% of the world's population. The question is, where are these markets, and can we upgrade our product qualities to deliver higher price points for us? James K. Baxter, one of New Zealand's great poets, wrote in the late 60s about his New Zealand. His telling words are now permanently burnt into my brain, when he said, "These unshaped islands on the sawyer's bench are waiting for the chisel of the mind." A poet encouraging us to use our brains more than our brawn. Even earlier, Ernest Rutherford, another New Zealander from Nelson who first split the atom, also quoted, "We haven't got the money, so we've got to think." How do we use our intellect to add value in these beautiful islands? And no matter how long we have been here, we are all Euronesians with an eye to the north. We must return to the old world from the new, taking with us our unique IP, regardless of where it's made. As our Englishness shrinks away, we are only just beginning to decide what we replace it with. Being inspired by the environment around us, in fashioning of our products and services, is the key to offering something different in a crowded world of choice. Like the early navigators, we have to set a new course, a new star path, our very own Ave'ia. We as New Zealanders have to find our own way to reinvigorate this economy. In our case, our grass is greener, but grass alone won't get us where we need to be. We pioneered the welfare state. However, our challenge is not to simply move from dependence to independence, but rather move to a third state of interdependence, which is precisely what this discussion is about. Learning how to compete together. My hope is that this will be the new dawn for this place that I truly love. The lessons from this discussion should be simple ones, applied in your own special ways. After all, economics is only the painful elaboration of the obvious. Long-term sustainable change happens only when people discover their own power. The secret is moving the centre of gravity to where the decisions are made, closer to the people in the community, and away from a centrally directed top-down approach. For the first time in human history, technology is enabling people to maintain those rich connections and help these discrete communities develop competitive behaviours. Remoteness is no longer the issue for us or anyone else here in God's own country. We've come to this presentation as professionals to discuss competitiveness, and we live on the edge of the world, and we now discover it's not flat and none of us will fall off. I just wanted to say thank you for viewing this presentation and my personal best wishes. I do hope that you capture your Ave'ia and your very own star paths in your endeavours. To all of you from everywhere, may I extend a warm welcome on behalf of every New Zealander. To hongi, or rub noses, means to share the breath of life. Through the exchange of this physical greetings, you are no longer considered manahiri or visitor, but rather tangata whenua, one of the people of our land. Haere mai, haere mai, haere mai.